due to another's mind. I never knew it would take everything from me. Trying to find the pieces, I'm trying to find the broken lead. You know we're dancing in the fire while we watch the flames blow. No, we were never meant to get out alive. Yeah, we rusted out of time, and now I'm falling from the sky. I can't believe my eyes, I'm seeing it all, now the color blinds. Baby, if you want it more, put it all on. Time in a lullaby, I'm seeing it all, now the color blinds. I can see the cars running from me, realizing more than I can ever see. I can see the cars running from me, realizing more than I can ever see. I'm falling from the sky. Now we're gonna baby, if you want it more, put it all on. Time in the lullaby, seeing it all, now the color blinds. I've tried to tend this flame for countless days because it makes me feel safe. So why does it seem to be that the more I feel it, the less I feel free? Now every time I close my eyes, my heart rate jumps to double time. 'Cause when I try to sleep, I realize that I'm running out of life. Does anybody care? Does anybody care? I'm running out of life. Does anybody care? Does anybody care? No!
Here I go, wasting time with this contemplation, a line with no concentration, can't find a way to save my soul from this cycle. Survival is stuck on idle, compiled with this denial. And see now, I know that I should think of the present, not second guessing effects of all of the stresses that I can't control. How time is limited, live it with no indifference to blow on your own. It's time to open my eyes to realize
Running out of life. Does anybody care? Does anybody care? Running out of life. Does anybody care? Does anybody care? No!
Show me the product, we could've did it. Everything all crazy, it's I'ma get it. And I just wanna move on and not regret it. But the past is too dark, I just can't forget it. Securing the nails in the coffin. I don't get this feeling so often. You made me this well, what's off it? I'm done now with.
Welcome back to the Stack Shack Sports Show. We're live again today. Yeah, yesterday was fun, so I thought I'd do it again today. We're going to start today's show off real simply. Let's recap kind of what happened yesterday. So yesterday, college football playoff rankings come out. I went live with kind of just a raw reaction. Let's summarize. What is the problem? Why is everybody up in arms? And is there any solution to it? That's kind of what we're going to cover today on the show. So if you didn't see, I don't know how you didn't, but if you didn't see, here are the rankings for the CFP. Give me 1 second here. Lost my window. There we go. Here's the rankings. Here's what everybody's freaking out about. Here's what everybody's frustrated about all season. This is the commotion, right? Rankings come out, and I'm just going to scroll through them here. We talked a lot about this yesterday, okay? But here's the crux, I think, of what everybody's frustrated about. It doesn't boil down to just, oh, Miami fans are really mad that they're below Notre Dame. They are. That is true. But BYU fans are mad that they're below Oklahoma, Alabama, and Notre Dame when they have less losses, right? So you got Miami fans mad. You got BYU fans mad. Then you had week to week, last week to this week, Alabama all of a sudden jumps Notre Dame after beating Auburn, who's not bowl eligible, by 7 points with a 4th down touchdown late in the game. Notre Dame blew out also not bowl eligible Stanford. They were up 42-6 at one point. Okay, like why is Alabama jumping Notre Dame? So you got a bunch of Notre Dame fans that are really mad, right? They're looking at this going, "Oh my gosh, we thought we were safe at 9. Now Alabama jumps us. We're at 10. Once you bring in, ACC champion or group of 5 champions, conference champions. Now we're on 12, and if BYU or Miami jump us, then we're out of the playoff. We thought we were safe. We didn't think there was any chance. Neither did Vegas, to be honest. I mean, go look at the odds right now. So Notre Dame fans are mad, right? These teams aren't too mad. There's not a lot of debate up there. Texas is mad, right? They're sitting here, they're like, we're 9-3, I get it, but shouldn't we get some credit or at least not be punished for scheduling Ohio State? We beat multiple teams in the top 10, and we smoked Vandy, right? So if you're looking at top 15 wins, Texas has got the most of them, right? And they're saying, why are we getting essentially punished for scheduling and playing Ohio State week 1 of the season? Notre Dame doesn't seem to be getting punished too much for playing Miami the first game of the season, so that doesn't seem right. So Texas fans are mad. Vanderbilt fans are mad. Why? Because they're saying we're 10-2, and it's not our fault that the schedule wasn't great. Why are we not getting some credit? Why is Vanderbilt not even being talked about with the Alabama, Oklahomas, Notre Dames, Miamis of the world, right? Realistically, Miami doesn't have as worse losses as Miami. Vanderbilt, they're not in bad shape here. They lost to Texas. Texas is ranked 13th. That's a decent loss, right? Then you come down here, Virginia is 10-2, and the ACC as a whole is mad because Virginia is going to play Duke, who, if we scroll down here, is not ranked. They're 7-5. And if Duke wins that game, there's talk that, hey, sorry, Tulane and James Madison are going to get in ahead of you. And the ACC, you're not going to make the playoff at all. No team from the ACC make the playoff. That's not good. So the ACC's mad that this could happen. Group of 5 seem probably pretty okay. We'll be honest. I don't think Tulane's too mad about their position. I don't think James Madison or North Texas are super mad. North Texas Tulane is that championship game, so that's going to be a big game this weekend because it's essentially win and get in, just with how the rankings are. Now, could James Madison look really, really good and somehow bump a North Texas? I don't know. I think James Madison's only opportunity is if Duke wins and 2 group of 5s get in. That's really where we're at. So everybody's mad. Nobody's happy with the committee. And I'm here to tell you, it's not just the committee that people are mad at. The biggest problem right now in college football with the committee is nobody understands what the criteria is. And I mean, Mike Elko was talking about it today in a press conference. Like, this is not just teams, the teams that are in, even they're wondering, I'm not sure how we're in or why we're in, right? Does out-of-conference scheduling mean something? Texas A&M? Texas A&M 11-1, didn't really play anybody in the SEC. We'll talk about that in a moment when I go to fix what is wrong in college football. But they're getting credit, I guess, for beating Notre Dame, right? So maybe it's big out-of-conference wins. Well, Miami's not getting the same credit for beating Notre Dame. That doesn't make sense. Texas is getting credit for beating Vandy, even though they have one more loss. So it doesn't seem to be that, or maybe it is. Maybe it's worse losses. Well, BYU has arguably the best loss of any of these teams, right? They have one of them, and it's to the number 4 team in the country on the road. That's a pretty good loss. That would have explained Notre Dame over Miami, but it doesn't explain why BYU is behind Notre Dame, Alabama, and Oklahoma. Arguably, if you're going by who has the worst losses, Texas A&M loss to Texas is worse than BYU's loss to Texas Tech, so maybe BYU should be up higher. So it's not worse losses. It's not out-of-conference wins. It doesn't even really seem to be like best wins, right? Because Miami has a win literally over Notre Dame, and yet they're ranked behind them. Texas has some of the best wins, period, right? They beat Texas A&M. They also beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma's 10-2, Vandy's 10-2. Texas beat both of them. They're only ranked ahead of Vandy. That seems strange. So it's not best wins. So what is it? And that is the problem with the committee right now. Nobody knows. Nobody can make sense of how these teams are getting ranked. It's all over the place. We just went through a bunch. All of them inconsistencies. And that's a big problem, right? This is what the playoff is supposed to get rid of, right? We all were upset with, hey, we don't like that committees or computers or voters are deciding who's our national champion. So we want to play the games. Again, you go way back, it was voted. Like newspaper people are voting on who gets the championship. Didn't like that. So we said, all right, we're bringing in the BCS. We're going to have computers. It's, hey, no bias, right? We're going to have the computers rank every team. And then at the end of the year, we're going to at least play a game, right? We're going to play one game, 1 versus 2. Then we said, the computers are pretty arbitrary, and at the beginning of the season, just because of how the computer's ranking teams and where teams are getting placed at the beginning of the season, it feels like, hey, certain teams just literally have no chance. Like Boise State, a group of 5 team in particular, just literally has no chance. Now, we'd probably all make the argument that most of the time the group of 5 is not going to have the best team in the country. But there's been some good Cincinnati teams. There's been some good Boise State teams. UCF had that run for a while there. Those are decent football teams, right? And I think a lot of people would have kind of liked to have them at least have a chance to get into the playoff. And with the BCS system, because of how rankings were at the beginning of the year and how they played out and how the computers ranked and scored everything, it really, was maybe not our favorite. There was too much numbers and analytics involved. Not really. It's not watching the games, obviously, right? And then it's only picking 2 teams. And sometimes we thought, what happens when there's 3 or 4 undefeated teams? Well, who's going to get in? Who are we putting in, right? I mean, this year, I guess the BCS championship game would be against Ohio State and Indiana, maybe. I don't know. But I think we'd all agree. We're like, hey, Texas Tech, they have 1 loss, but we all know that was without their quarterback. So maybe Texas Tech should have a chance, right? And so we said, okay, BCS no more. We're going to a playoff, and we're going to have a committee do it. We're going to have real people watch the games that can be nuanced, but still, hopefully, and this is where they've failed, follow some sort of criteria, or at least let us know kind of how they're ranking teams. We, I guess, unfortunately assumed head-to-head would be the most important thing and that out-of-conference games would be rewarded, and it seems like they are for some teams. Texas over Vanderbilt, but not for others. Texas over Oklahoma, Miami over Notre Dame, right? And the 4-team playoff, it just didn't feel like enough teams. Because like we said, hey, that 5th-ranked team, Oregon's gotten better as the season's gone on. Ole Miss has gotten better. We need more than 4 teams in. And group of 5, once again, in a 4-team playoff, almost has no chance to get in. And we liked the idea of teams like Ohio State last season, just last year, the first year of the 12-team playoff. Ohio State had 2 losses on that year. A very bad one to Michigan right at the end of the year, and they also lost to Oregon. And yet, I think everyone would probably agree, Ohio State was the best football team in the country last year. They won every playoff game pretty handedly, including avenging their loss to Oregon in an absolute bloodbath in the Rose Bowl. So, we liked that. And now we come to this season, and we've just lost the plot as the committee. I don't know. We don't know how they're ranking teams. And that kind of subjectivity and inconsistency is breaking college football. So I've got a solution for it. I do. And we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. Before we get there, though, there's been a couple of other breaking topics. I talked about the playoff yesterday. You can go watch really unfiltered ranting about that if you want. Coaching. Part of the problem, and one of the symptoms, and again, why I'm going to have a solution at the end for this, college football calendar seems to be a little broken, and we have 2 high-profile coaching searches that have made some serious headlines. So let's look at the first one, and really the one that's causing problems right now. I'm going to pull up article here, Fox Sports. Penn State still doesn't have a coach. And that's a bit unfortunate. That's tough. It's pretty rough here. Penn State, no coach right now. And, this article was recently updated. It's published this morning. And Jeff Brahms even mentioned in this one. Well, since this article, Jeff Brahms already said he's staying at Louisville. He's told Louisville he's staying there, is the reports right now. So Penn State is in a bit of a mess. They were the first to fire their coach. They did it early so that they could get started on the search early. And then nobody showed up. They couldn't get a coach. It seems like they probably wanted Cignetti at Indiana. Cignetti says, no, thank you. I'm staying at Indiana, signs a big extension, right? All these coaches started signing extensions. And then Penn State's like, oh no. So then this week, today was National Signing Day. Not having a coach today is problematic, right? And it's playing out. They still don't have a coach today. They signed, I think, the worst class. I think they only had 2 players. 2 recruits signed with them. And I, honestly, I got to give a shout out. I think it's a defensive lineman, maybe, and I know a quarterback, and I think a defensive lineman signed. I got to give a shout out to those players. I respect you for honoring your, verbal commitment, but to have that many decommits, well, it's because you don't have a coach. These kids don't know who they're playing for. And most likely they were originally recruited by Franklin, and I would assume him and his coaching staff was part of the reason they decided to go to Penn State, or at least verbally commit to. So it's no surprise that they're dropping out. And just this week, they tried to land Kalani Sitake, who actually, BYU head coach, I think that would have been kind of a landmark hire. I think that would have been a good hire for them. Apparently, there was kind of some mutual interest between Sitake and Penn State. It was maybe one of his more dream jobs. He was really looking forward to it. Well, BYU heard that, hey, Sitake's thinking about leaving, and they broke out the coffers. I mean, we got the CEO of Crumble Cookie. We got the CEO of a supplement brand. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Getting involved and being like, what do you need, Sitake? What's it going to take for you to stay here? Sitake seems, I believe he's LDS Mormon faith. Obviously, coaching at BYU, that makes sense. So there's a faith element to it, right? So it's going to be harder to get him away anyways. And then when, multi-billion-dollar CEO companies come in and say, hey, blank check, what do you need to stay? I think you combine that with, he obviously has a faith in what BYU is doing with that whole entire religion. Like, we got religion and Crumble Cookies involved, and all of a sudden, yeah, coaches stand. So he signed a big extension at BYU. Happy for him. Way to get the bag. Shout out Penn State for getting all these coordinators and coaches big salaries, right? Cignetti signs an extension. Sitake signs an extension, right? The list goes on. So who's left, honestly? Who's left, and what does Penn State do? And did they make the right decision in firing James Franklin? I think I'll start by saying they made the right decision to fire James Franklin. And I know that, might be a bit of a hot take. A lot of pundits are like, why'd you fire James Franklin? I know James Franklin's agent is very upset, and he also happens to be the agent for a lot of people in the industry, other coaches, people in the media, etc. And so they're kind of running this campaign, and that's fair to say, hey, you should not have fired James Franklin. They're punishing him. That's the rumor out there. But I think you needed to fire James Franklin. Okay, he'd been there for 10 years, 11 years. That's enough time. Sometimes you just need a new start. And I actually think he's going to be a great coach at Virginia Tech. They signed a pretty good class for Virginia Tech this year. Stole a few Penn State recruits. Actually kept a lot of the recruits that were originally thinking of staying there. So I think he's going to do fine at Virginia Tech. But there is some truth to it was time to leave Penn State. Sometimes you've been there for 10 years, you haven't won the national championship. You're winning a lot of games, but you might need some new juice in the building. Okay? Just a new perspective. And for James Franklin, I think he needed a new place to coach, a new challenge. It can be like invigorating to start a new job. Sometimes you can get just kind of stuck in the going through the motions if you've been at a company for a long time, right? And I think that's very similar in football coaches. You know, you see a coach, it's being talked about in the NFL right now with Mike Tomlin, right? He's a coach. He hasn't won playoff games. They haven't had a losing season in forever. Is it time for Tomlin to move on? And I think it was time to separate from James Franklin. You know, he led them out of a very dark time for Penn State athletics. You know, there were lots of sanctions involved and things like that. And he has come out of that. You know, that was not long in the past when he started there. And I think he's done a good job. You know, he got Penn State back to relevance, but he couldn't win the big game. He couldn't get over the hump. And he'd been there 10 plus years. It's time to find some new juice, some new life in the building. So Penn State, I think, made the right decision. The problem is they haven't been able to find a coach, and that part of it could be some serious mismanagement. Firing James Franklin, I don't think was the mistake. Now, there has definitely been a mistake in not having a coach. Now, Klatt's been talking Dable. Actually, I think Dable might be the leading candidate on a lot of the prediction markets. So you got Dable. We were thinking maybe Jeff Brom this morning, although this evening it looks like that's a no. Who else is out there? Well, you got some coaches that are still, you know, playing and coaching their teams. People are saying Kalen DeBoer. I don't think DeBoer leaves. He is more of a Midwest guy, but I think because he made the playoff, most likely, again, we're assuming that the committee is going to have any level of consistency, which maybe that's a mistake. But DeBoer most likely is in the playoff this year. It's possible he wins a playoff game or two. You can win a national title at Alabama. And I don't really think, unlike the next coach we're going to talk about, I don't believe that DeBoer actually believes in his heart Penn State is a better job, necessarily. So it would only be if DeBoer actually didn't like being in Alabama, didn't maybe like the pressure, or didn't like living in the area because he's more of a Midwest. I think he started South Dakota. I don't see DeBoer leaving. I think the only person that they're really on at this point is probably Dable. I think that's the best one. Maybe Manny Diaz obviously has connections to Penn State. And he's coaching Duke, who's in the ACC championship game. So that's a thing, right? We're going to have a situation there where he probably wouldn't want to leave quite yet. So it's possible, because he's still coaching, that you have an opportunity for Manny Diaz to go. But, you know, some other names that were out there originally, you know, Matt Rule being a Penn State guy, he's locked up, new contract. Again, like I said at the beginning, shout out Penn State for getting a bunch of people extensions, right? They got Cignetti an extension, they got Rule an extension, they got Sataki an extension. You know, the list goes on and on. They're running out of options. So, again, I think Penn State made the right decision in firing. I think they've poorly managed the search. They needed to lock somebody down earlier. And that moves us on to the other big coaching moment, and that is Lane Kiffin. So, unlike Penn State, LSU fired their coach in the season, which is similar to Penn State, a little later. But Lane Kiffin is now your coach of the LSU Tigers, and that is significant, right? LSU gets their coach. So this is a whole nother can of worms, and really the second of two major stories in college football from the coaching perspective. Penn State can't find a coach. Lane Kiffin just abandoned a college football playoff team. Remember, we were looking at the rankings, right? Ole Miss is the team he left to coach at LSU. Ole Miss is ranked 6th in the country. They actually moved up this week, which is, a little odd when the coach and play caller leaves, but whatever. We'll see. We'll see how the week goes on. But Ole Miss is 11-1, having the best season of their entire school's history. And Lane Kiffin leaves them. What? It's hard to have a take here. I'm going to be honest. It's hard to have a take here because I don't understand how you leave a team that's making a playoff run. Now, there's kind of two sides of this. One side is absolutely slamming Lane Kiffin for leaving. And the other side is saying it's not Lane's fault. It really isn't. It's actually college football's calendar's fault. And what I'm going to say to that is the college football calendar does have some issues. It does. Flat out does have issues. But Lane Kiffin knew what the calendar was. And he made decisions, and decisions have consequences. We can be mad at the calendar. Sure, it's really unfortunate that signing day is today, and if you're LSU, you really don't want to be in a Penn State situation where all your recruits go other places because you don't have a coach. And if you're Lane Kiffin, and let's say you're sitting there going, I'm at Ole Miss. I know I'm going to go to LSU, but I want to wait till the end of the season. Well, you can't be coaching two teams in the same conference that are rivals, to be honest, of each other at the same time. There's so many conflicts of interest there, it's absurd. So what do you do if you're Lane? You don't want to wait and then go to LSU with no recruiting class, right? Like that actually is a pretty big downside now to the Penn State job, and why it might actually be harder moving forward to get a good coach is he's going to go, okay, I can come coach there, but me and what players? You lost your entire class except for 2 players. Who's going to be on the team, right? And so if you're Lane, you obviously don't want LSU to be without a coach, miss out on a bunch of recruits, and then go there. You want to go there and be able to get recruits and start rebuilding the program. So I get the argument that the calendar is broken, and that is unfortunate. But you know what else you can do if you're Lane Kiffin? You can stay at Ole Miss. The rumors are that Ole Miss said we'll match any offer that LSU gives you. And I'm sorry, but Lane, you've got a history now. It's a pattern. Basically, every place you've left is messy. Now, LSU fans, I hope you understand that, because he may leave you. I don't know if he would. I think LSU realistically is probably one of the best jobs in the country, but what if the NFL comes calling? Is Lane going to leave you high and dry? It's a pattern now. I mean, Saban kicked him off the team, essentially. Didn't let him coach in the championship game because he was afraid Lane was too much of a distraction with these very unfortunate leaving moments, right? Left Tennessee after a year. USC didn't end well. He rebuilt his brand a little bit at Ole Miss. But now, just like every other time, he jumps ship and it's messy. So you had an opportunity here if you're Lane. This is my bottom line take. There are other coaches right now that are taking new jobs that are coaching the rest of the season with their teams. I don't think that was ever realistically an option at Ole Miss. But to me, if you really cared about Ole Miss, you really cared about those players, you would have stayed at Ole Miss. And again, he has every right to do whatever he wants. He can work wherever he wants. But hear me when I say this, you also have to deal with the consequences. You left a team right before they entered a playoff run. You had an opportunity to win a national championship at Ole Miss. That would have been historic, and it would have solidified an amazing legacy for Lane Kiffin. Of this guy bounced around a lot, he had some troubles, he rebuilt himself at Ole Miss, and he won a national championship. It's possible. We were just looking at the rankings. They seem like a pretty darn good team. You got to deal with the consequences of leaving. Like, I don't want to hear it. I get it. The college football calendar has some issues. But you also knew about those issues and chose to take another job. Not for, millions more dollars, at least rumored. Ole Miss offered the same, or at least put forth the idea that, hey, we'll counter and we'll match whatever LSU's given you. And you decided to leave. So you get to deal with the blowback, right? And no, poor me, you're not a victim here to the big bad college football calendar. Most coaches would say you should have stayed with the team. And especially in this era of NIL, transfer portal, the way recruiting works now, the biggest brands don't necessarily dominate. Right? Saban at Alabama, that's not going to happen anymore. He used to lock up all the best recruits and lock them up for essentially 4 years because they're signed with their team. And the amount of depth he had, the lack of ability for people to transfer out, he could kind of monopolize the power and the best players. And that's fine. That's how the rules were set up. I don't begrudge Nick at all. I mean, if there was some cheating, that'd be bad, but it doesn't seem like realistically there was too much. But now that everybody can pay players, and if you're going to be, second stringer, third stringer at Alabama, used to be, well, you were stuck at Alabama and you just had to wait. And then get your shot for a year, your, junior, senior year, and go to the NFL. And that's how you'd made your money. Now, you could be a third stringer who's really good. Maybe you're a freshman, really good. Not really going to play at Alabama. And you can make the decision, hey, I'm not going to play at Alabama for like 2 or 3 years. I might as well go to Texas Tech. They're going to pay me just as much, if not more than Alabama, because I'd be a starter. And they have a path to the playoff. And so in this era, I get that LSU has been historically a better job. It's more, they've won national championships there. It is possible, obviously, to win national championships at LSU. It's been done multiple times before. But I think we're in a new era, and I think it's perfectly possible you could won national championships at Ole Miss. So, I personally, I feel like Lane's ruined a lot of his credibility. If I was a coach or a player, again, an assistant coach looking to get hired on a staff, I don't know if I'd want to work for Lane because he might leave me at any moment. And the same goes for a player. Like, Lane Kiffin comes to my house or sends me a letter and says, hey, you should come play at LSU. We're building something special here. We got a chance to win a title. Come play for me. I'll get the best out of you. Even if I believe all of those things are true, and that Lane Kiffin will get the best out of me as a player and he's the right coach to play for. What happens when he leaves? What happens when he leaves me? Because you know what? I'm sure Ole Miss heard all those exact same things, and he's now gone just as they have built something special. They've got a chance to win a national championship. And realistically, it seemed like Lane, as the offensive coordinator and head coach, the play caller, was getting the most out of his players. And he left them. And now, again, if you are of the belief that Lane is the reason, and that's why I wanted to go play for him, because he's a great play caller and a great coach, and he'll get the best out of the team, by that logic, you are now no longer going to get the best out of the team. And that right there is very unfortunate. It just is. So, Lane, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear about the calendar. You knew what the calendar was. You knew the risks involved in moving in that direction. And you still chose to do it. So you got to deal with the consequences. And the consequences are going to be players, coaches, fans are going to be pretty upset with you. And once again, you've harmed, I would say. I would say destroyed. But harmed your reputation as a coach and as a leader. And I think that's, LSU, good luck, right? How did it work last time when you hired a coach who kind of had a messy exit? It's the coach you just fired, Brian Kelly. So, these things happen. Coaches are welcome to move, but I don't want to hear any, oh, it's not my fault, woe is me, right? It absolutely is your fault. It 100% is. 100% is your fault. You're dealing with the consequences. You knew what you were getting yourselves into. So with that, let's fix college football. Okay, this is hopefully why you tuned in. I thank everybody for showing up. We're gonna fix college football tonight. I have a strategy, and I gave myself some parameters. So let's start with that. How would I fix college football playoff, specifically the playoff? But I want to look at the whole season. I want to look at the sport, right? Because there's certain things that are good for the sport, I would argue. Big games, right? We like to see Texas-Ohio State week 1. That was exciting. We want to see big out-of-conference games during the season, okay? So that's number one. We want to incentivize big games. Number two, we want to clarify what are the metrics. How do you get in? What's the path to the playoff for teams? Because as we talked about earlier in the stream, right now, nobody knows. Nobody knows what the criteria is. The committee seems to be all over the place. So we want to clarify that. We want to still incentivize big games. And we want to try and make sure that we have a good balance between most deserving and best, right? Because in the college football landscape, and to be fair, this is a problem all sports have. Go look at the NBA, go look at the NFL. Not all schedules are created equal, right? And so it's possible you're going to run into a situation where you have a tougher schedule than another team. And how do you kind of deal with that? Is it best teams? Are we looking at the eye test? Are we looking at big wins, etc., etc.? So here's how I'm going to fix it. And I'll pull up the rankings to start here. The first thing, and I think this is the thing that is getting missed in most of the dialogue. Our biggest problems, in my opinion, this season in the rankings, and why this is so convoluted and all over the place from the committee, is conferences did something recently that kind of screwed everything up. And that is they got rid of divisions. I'm going to let you sit with that one for a moment. They missed an opportunity when all the conference realignment happened. They also got rid of divisions. That's a problem. And here's why. By not having divisions, I'm going to use Miami as the poster child for this example. Miami did not make the ACC championship game. We all love head-to-head. That's how we break tiebreakers all over the place. That is how we do it in every sport. Miami is not in the ACC championship game. And this season, never had an opportunity to play either of the two teams that are in the ACC championship game. Miami didn't play Duke or Virginia. Why is that? Because the ACC has a lot of teams in it, and you can't play all of them. And so you have a team like Miami that is literally competing against Virginia and Duke for a spot in a championship game that, by the rankings, they are the best team in the ACC, but because they never got an opportunity to play and prove that against Virginia or Duke, they don't get to play in that game, and they don't get an automatic bid. The playoff is not broken as you think it is. It's just difficult when you don't actually have head-to-head matchups. Another great example of this is Texas A&M, and I have their schedule pulled up here. Let's look at this schedule. Okay, out-of-conference games, terrible. Now, they did play Notre Dame. That was a good win. Okay, we'll give them that one. Then let's look at their SEC, sequence, their schedule of in-conference. Well, they played Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, Arkansas, LSU, Missouri, South Carolina, and then Texas. Let's look at the SEC standings here. Okay. Texas A&M played, let's see, who did they play? Well, they played Arkansas, the worst team in the SEC. South Carolina, the next worst. Mississippi State, Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, LSU. This is their schedule. Now, they played Texas, and they lost. But they got to just essentially play all the worst teams in the conference. I guess Missouri is their best conference game besides Texas. Missouri's 4-4 in the conference, 8-4 overall. They're not great. And that's a problem. Because Texas is sitting here going, what the hell, man? We had a way more difficult schedule. Let's go look at Texas's schedule. Well, first of all, they had to play Ohio State. Now, we don't know beginning of the season how good is Ohio State, how good is Notre Dame, right? Those are both two, high-level out-of-conference games. Then they play three cupcakes. But they had to play Oklahoma. They had to play Vanderbilt. They had to play Georgia and Texas A&M. That's a lot of teams up here in the top of the SEC, if you didn't notice. So Texas falls and has a bad moment against Florida and loses. Were they looking ahead to their Oklahoma game? Probably. It happens. But if you're Texas, don't get mad at Notre Dame, BYU, Miami. Get mad at the SEC for letting Texas A&M have a cakewalk of a schedule, and you not. So that's the first way I'm going to solve this. And I actually prepared a couple of sample divisions, and then I want you to see how this plays out. So that's the first thing. We're going to get divisions back. And here's how this is going to solve our problems. If we split these conferences in divisions, here's the SEC, here's the Big Ten. ACC is a little funky because Notre Dame is not fully a member, so they have an odd number of teams. I'll explain the solution for that. Big 12, again. What this means is essentially these conferences have 8 or 9 teams in each division, which allows, and we'll focus on the SEC for a moment. It allows you to play every single team in your division. So you don't have the Miami situation. And it also means you're not going to be competing for a spot in that conference championship game with a team from, other divisions that have a wildly different schedule than you. This setup, there's 8 teams, 12 games in a season, okay? You play every team in your division once. We're using the SEC. Big Ten, this gets slightly different, but not too much. Play every team in your division once. You play one cross-divisional game. That way you can still have some fun rivalries. And again, this whole setting up the divisions, all I did was take the SEC standings right now, and I just kind of went one here, one here, one here. We just went back and forth, okay? And tried to make it essentially even off of this year's SEC standings. It doesn't really matter who's in either side. It just matters that they're all going to play each other, and so you get head-to-heads. You actually have tiebreakers available. You don't run into a Miami situation where, oh boy, they didn't get to play Duke or Virginia, and all of a sudden they're out of the ACC championship game. So that fixes some of the scheduling back and forth. Now you might say, okay, well, Nathaniel, let's be honest here. What if they really screwed up, or maybe in 5 years, all of a sudden, this division up here, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida get really good, and Vanderbilt kind of falls off, and Oklahoma's having a couple down years, and Ole Miss is bad, and Georgia's the only good team in this. Well, that happens in sports all the time. Go look at the NBA right now. Look at them right now. The West in the NBA is way better than the East. But because you have these realistic head-to-head tiebreakers, we all understand that sometimes, it happens in the NFL too, a division winner in the NFL can have a losing record. It's happened. And then all of a sudden they're playing a wild card team with a better record and they're playing at home. It happens. You can't predict for all of that unless you just redid the entire season right after the season, and that wouldn't make sense, right? So it is okay if there's some differences here because you're giving every team a true opportunity to prove themselves. So how I would structure this is SEC, Big Ten, ACC. Big Ten, I did a little differently. I actually did it a little more regionally. That way we can cut down on all these coaches complaining about flying cross country as much, right? So I kind of put some of the more West Coast teams, USC, UCLA, Washington, into the same side. Again, you could do this a million ways. It really does not matter what teams are in either side. It's just that there are 2 sides and that you get to play everybody on your side. Big Ten might not be able to play the cross-divisional game in order to still leave room for their 3 or 4 out-of-conference games. But, maybe they only play 2 out-of-conference and they still get it, right? Because there's 9 teams instead of 8. ACC, there's 9 in one, 8 in the other. Notre Dame has a contract with the ACC in all sports but football. They are a full member of the ACC. And then in football, they're required to play a certain number of games. So you can work this out scheduling-wise pretty simply. Play all the teams in your division. Whichever division has 8 teams, maybe that's where you have those teams also play Notre Dame, right? And not necessarily every single one, but you use some of those. Otherwise, it's an extra out-of-conference game, or maybe it's an extra cross-conference game, right? For, the teams in the smaller division. Big 12, it works out the same as the SEC, eight games, okay? Which leaves 4 more games. Again, 1 cross-division game, 3 out-of-conference games. And then what we do is the conference winners get the buys. And I'm going to go back to the rankings here because we'll roll through this and kind of do a simulation. The next step after you reinstitute divisions, and all these conferences had divisions, folks, they all already had divisions. And I see a comment here, reorganize every year. That is totally possible. They could totally do exactly what I did here and go right down the list and reseed the 2 divisions. Keep things real fresh and interesting every year. It's totally fine, right? These conferences, the NFL redoes the schedule every single season, right? So it's possible to redo your divisions if you're in the SEC every single season if you want to. I don't know if you necessarily need to, but what you do is you take the 2 divisions in the Power 4 conferences. Now, Pac-12 is coming, but it's really not quite a power conference yet. And you do have, group of 5s, and we'll get to those. But how you set this up is that every single Power 4 conference gets 2 guaranteed automatic bids. And it is the 2 teams that make their conference championship. Win your division, you're going to the playoff. Now you might say, okay, you just devalued everything about the conference championships games, and we still think those are important. Okay? No, I didn't, because hold on. The winner of each of the Power 4 conferences get the 4 buys. Again, I set this up with the parameter of I didn't want to move and expand the college football playoff. You can expand the playoff and you can solve this in a few different ways. I've heard like a little play-in tournament, right? Maybe you do 12, but then the bottom 4 teams all play each other, and now it's a 14-team playoff. The first 4 out, right? And now, what if we left it at 12 teams? Power 4 conferences, if you make your conference championship game, you're in the playoff. Then, if you win your conference championship and you're in a power conference, you get an automatic bye. All right. So what does that do to our playoff? There's one other rule that I'm putting in, and this might be the controversial one. No more than 4 teams in any one conference can make the playoff. And here's why I'm doing that. First of all, by having these divisions, we're going to be pretty confident who the best teams are in each conference. Unlike right now, where it's very possible Texas is a much better team than Texas A&M. Texas beat them head-to-head. Texas A&M got kind of a cupcake schedule in the SEC, and all of a sudden they're in. But if there's divisions and everybody plays everybody, we will be pretty confident we know, and we won't have to worry as much about the at-large teams. So I'm limiting everyone to 4. You get 4 max. Now, you don't necessarily get 4 guaranteed, obviously. That's too many teams, right? We got Power 4 conferences, 4 teams each. That'd be 16. We're already over. And we haven't even talked about Group of 5 or Notre Dame as a non-conference. You are limited, though, to the top 4 teams. I think in this scenario, we've got very fair conferences. If you're finishing 5th in your conference, I'm pretty confident you are not the best team in the country. Remember the original criteria at the beginning. I want to make sure I have the best team in the country in every year. Maybe some teams that are not as good will get in, but I want to make sure at least that I have the best team. And if you finish 5th in your conference, I'm sorry. There's no reason to get in, right? This gives a lot of power to the conferences. Hey, you want to get mad? Talk to your conference about how they're setting things up. It takes the power away from the committee, which I think would be a good thing. Okay? So we've addressed the difficulty in the regular season in conference schedules of figuring out who the best teams are in a conference. We've given everybody a right and a path to their conference championship. And we have lots of tiebreaker head-to-head matchups that can help us figure out really who is the best teams in a particular conference. Because right now, again, Miami, we were just looking at them. They didn't get to play Duke or Virginia. And those are the two teams in the conference championship. I think everyone would agree Miami is probably more deserving than Duke for sure at 7-5, right? 10-2 with a win over Notre Dame. They're probably a better team. But they don't get that right because, well, they never got to play them. And the way the ACC does their tiebreakers, when you don't play, kind of screwed Miami up a little bit. So we've solved the in-conference scheduling. We've solved the devaluing of conference championship games, because everybody's talking about it right now. Would the committee drop Alabama? If the committee drops Alabama out of the playoff because they get boat raced by Georgia, guess what's going to happen next year when Alabama makes the playoff or makes the conference championship game? They're going to sit out. They're going to say, nope, don't care. We want to be in the conference championship, where we want to be in the playoff. And last year we got punished because we played a game and lost. And we would have been there. There's a lot of money on the line, like legitimately, for these teams. And these players want to have an opportunity to win a championship, a national championship, not just a conference championship. So we've solved that by giving a guaranteed bid into the playoff for both teams that make the conference championship game. And we've given an incentive to win that game by giving all 4 of them buys. Huge benefit. Now, Group of 5 fans, I think you're going to have to just take a deep breath and be reasonable. You're not getting buys. I'm sorry. That feels bad. But realistically, maybe only one time ever have you been kind of ranked in the top 4, and that was Cincinnati, and then they got blown out in the playoff. Realistically, they probably shouldn't have been ranked that high. But I think people really wanted Cincinnati in the playoff, and so that was the only way to do it, because it was a 4-team playoff. Otherwise, you're not ever going to really be ranked in the top 4. So you're not getting a bye right now anyways. So I'm sorry, you're not getting a bye in the future, okay? We've incentivized the conference championship. We've fixed conference play. Now let's talk about out-of-conference play, because that's the game that Texas is really upset about right now. And to be fair, a team like Miami's kind of upset about it too. But Texas is probably the most angry because they're saying, hey, the only reason we're not in this playoff right now is because we decided to schedule Ohio State week 1, and we lost by 7 points, which is the closest margin of victory Ohio State's had all year, by the way. They're saying, hey, if we scheduled Chattanooga State, Tech, Northwestern, Cupcake, we're in the playoff at 10-2, and they're probably right. I'm not going to say 100%, but they would be 10-2 and have theoretically the tiebreaker over Oklahoma, although it's not working out so well for Miami, but you get the point. Texas is saying we would have beaten Texas A&M and Oklahoma this season. We would be in the playoff. And they're probably right. So how does this solve that situation? Well, by limiting each conference to only 4 teams. And we're still going to do rankings. And unfortunately, there is still going to have to be a committee involved in ranking teams. And maybe we go off the AP. I don't really like that. I think the AP is kind of crazy. But maybe we do something similar to how the BCS worked, where we take kind of an aggregate of like the AP, the coaches poll, and then a committee, and we weight it so that the committee is a little higher or whatever. Okay. With that structure, okay, you are now competing with the other conferences way more heavily because it's limited to only 4 teams from one conference. So right now, the SEC would be in a little bit of trouble, but it would benefit a team like Texas to go and play another conference so that you get in. We've limited the number of automatic bids, okay, that are available post conference championships. Again, you have an opportunity to get in by just winning your conference games. So you're going to have a decision to make. Texas, in that case, would not have been punished at all for losing to Ohio State because they would have had an opportunity and a path to winning their conference and therefore getting into the playoff. And like we already said, it would have eliminated the scheduling issues in the SEC. And the scheduling issues in all the big conferences. They're so big, they need divisions. So that happens. You're going to have essentially 2 paths of victory. Win your conference, or at least get to the championship game, or play a tough out-of-conference schedule so that you get ranked high. Texas A&M beating Notre Dame, etc. So it really does incentivize playing those out-of-conference games that are big without punishing you because there's extra automatic bids for dominating your conference should you struggle in the out-of-conference games. But should you slip up, you're Texas and you lose to Florida, you're Texas A&M and you lose to Texas, should you slip up in your conference by playing high difficulty out of conference games and getting a couple of wins, that gives you a solved solution for getting ranked higher and therefore getting one of those at-large bids. So again, 4 power conferences, each get 2 bids. That's 8. That means there's 4 spots left. And I'm limiting each conference to only 4 teams max. They don't get 4 teams. It's just you can't have more than 4 teams in your conference make it. This ensures that Group of 5 will still have a chance, that Notre Dame, not being in a conference, well, they're gunning for one of those 4 slots, but there's enough slots there, and by limiting the amount of teams that can get in from a specific conference, you clean that up as well. I think that would be a pretty great solution. So let's actually just walk through this with teams. I've ranked them here and kind of organized them, and we're going to go through the conference championships here. Okay, so here's how this would have played out this season, and I'm going to make a different, slightly different argument here. We're going to say that this is how the new conferences all played out. It doesn't necessarily mean it would have this way. Again, Texas, we've already talked about, would probably actually be up here. I mean, if you look at the SEC standings, Texas is ahead of Oklahoma, right, this season. And arguably, if Texas A&M has to play a tougher schedule, it's very possible those flip as well. So I'm going to just make that flip here. And we're going to take the rankings as they are, standings kind of as they are, and take an aggregate here. Okay, so Ohio State is favored to win. They win their conference, they get a bye. Indiana does not, but they were in their conference championship game, so they make the playoffs. Okay, Georgia, highest ranked SEC team, they make their bye. Alabama, playing them in the conference championship game, they get into the playoff. Texas Tech, highest ranked team, they win. BYU makes the playoff. So Big Ten, SEC, ACC, we're going to go Miami winning. Again, I'm kind of re-ranking this because I'm just assuming that Miami probably would have done well. And then I need to find Virginia. Oh boy, there's Virginia Tech. Here's Virginia. Virginia makes the playoff. And we're just going to assume this is how it worked. Okay? So now we're going to look at some at-large teams. Oregon makes the playoff. We've got 4 slots left. 4 slots here. Ole Miss. Texas. Uh-oh. Sorry, Texas A&M. I hate to break it to you, but I'm giving Texas as a higher rank, and I'm assuming Texas A&M lost a game. Realistically, right, Texas wouldn't because they have 3 losses this season, but I think if we can all agree, if these were the conferences, Texas A&M probably has more than 1 loss. Okay. So all of a sudden, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, I hate to break it to you, you both lost to Texas this season. You don't get in because we're capped. The SEC already has 1, 2, 3, 4 teams in. This season, Notre Dame ends up getting the last spot. But at least under this scenario, we can argue, we'd be like, wow, Texas A&M, that's tough. You beat Notre Dame and you don't get in the playoff. Again, I'm assuming they have more losses. You know, Oklahoma, you're highly ranked. How did you not get in the playoff? But again, at least this way, there is a guarantee that you had a path. You had every opportunity to make the playoff. And I think if we looked at this, I think most people would be pretty happy with this. Especially with the concept of divisions to clean up some of the scheduling mishaps between teams. So, I mean, honestly, if you're watching this after the live stream, let me know what you think. That is my solution. I'm going to answer a couple questions in the comments here, though. So, Group of 5, unfortunately, does not make it in. And that includes, right, the next season, we're going to have a Pac-8, I think it's going to be. I don't know if they're going to go by the Pac-12 or not. But I think they're going to have 8 teams. They wouldn't have gotten in this year. And you know what? Some years, they're not going to get in. And that's okay. As far as Notre Dame, they get in. Again, we had 4 at-large spots in my scenario. They're able to get in here by their ranking and the structure that I've set up here. As far as Notre Dame being a non-conference team, right? And this is the ACC in my solution. It gets a little awkward because we have 8 teams in one division, 9 teams in the other. Notre Dame's not a full member. How does that work? Notre Dame, a lot of people say, needs to join a conference. Not really. They need to understand, in my scenario, they're not getting an opportunity for an automatic bid. That would be, in my scenario, and how I'm structuring it, and my solution, a way for Notre Dame to get an automatic bid would be join a conference. So they're taking that risk. But the benefits that Notre Dame gets, and we got a wonderful chatter, thank you. The revenue they get from NBC and the publicity they get from essentially having their own network. And also, NBC is a public broadcast network, right? This is not the Texas Longhorns network that you got to pay extra for. Anybody with an antenna can watch Notre Dame football. That kind of revenue from their deal with NBC, that kind of exposure for their brand being essentially a free channel, is significant, and I don't think NBC and Notre Dame are going to sever that relationship, and I don't think Notre Dame wants to. They have great agreements, Notre Dame. I know their media team works a lot with NBC. Like, it's a great thing for the university in general, not just their football team. Notre Dame's students work right hand in hand with the broadcast team at NBC. It's a really special partnership. It's good for the education at Notre Dame. We do have to remember these are schools at the end of the day, and you know, they want to make some money, sure, and it's great to have the revenue sharing and all of that and not have to share it with a big conference, right? If you're Notre Dame, you just get all the money yourself, right? This was even a thing last season when we were talking about, oh, Notre Dame is in the playoffs and there's certain bonuses, right, that get paid out to the schools. Well, every team but Notre Dame, that money goes to the conference. Notre Dame just pockets the whole thing. They make so much money from that they're never going to not be independent. And to be fair, a lot of these other brands would love to do what Notre Dame does and be independent and schedule their games against other big teams and enjoy their season and get a lot of revenue. Notre Dame's just so much bigger of a brand, and they've just positioned themselves over the years in so much better of a position that they're actually able to stay independent. BYU used to be independent, but they didn't make the kind of money Notre Dame did, and so they joined a conference because it's financially viable to do so. So I don't see ND ever joining a conference. There's actually talk, this is kind of a side tangent, and maybe we'll have to do a video on it sometime, but there's talk of maybe Ohio State and Michigan, some of the Big Ten recent deals and collective bargaining stuff. There's opportunities that they may choose to go independent. So it's interesting. Just going to do a few more comments here before I end the show. But that's really my solution to college football in general. Got a question, or at least a comment that says, that's why I'm surprised their recruiting isn't better. I'm going to be honest. Did you see the recruiting numbers today? Notre Dame's just signed the second best class in the country. And not only that, but they had no decommits. Everybody who verbally committed to sign, signed. They signed everybody. So USC technically had the best recruiting numbers at the end of the year, or at least at the end of today for this season coming up next year. Notre Dame's number 2. USC has a lot of recruits. I think they signed 35, and that's really what put them up above, a Notre Dame team. Notre Dame, I think, actually had more 5 stars, most 5 stars they've ever signed in a class today. So the recruiting is definitely turning around. I agree with you. Why their recruiting wasn't better, especially back with Brian Kelly, I never understood that. Why it was so poor. They're a storied franchise. It's a good school, so there was the argument, maybe academic requirements or something like that. But at the end of the day, I'm sorry. You can recruit these students. Not all football players are somehow dumb. Like there's good tutoring. There's lots of academic resources. They can figure it out, right? And so Notre Dame actually had a really, really good recruiting day today. I don't disagree with you. I think if you're Ohio State, if you're Michigan, the Big Ten's a pretty good gig right now. I think if teams like that started to go independent, it's just really difficult. There's not enough channels for everybody to have their own channel, right? Like Notre Dame has a special deal here with the deal they have going on with NBC. Ohio State and Michigan aren't going to be able to just all of a sudden sign deals with their own, ABC already has deals, and, ACC plays on a network, Big Ten plays on a network. So that would just be very difficult. Yeah, I know. If you're a USC fan, hopefully some of those 35 players are going to play good on defense, because you've been struggling. But, I think this class is going to be really telling for Lane Kiffin and his potential future at USC, right? If you just signed a great class, you can't make an excuse of, oh, we didn't have good players. Recruiting was very down the last few seasons at USC, so it's a moment here to see what happens. And hey, Lincoln Riley, here's your opportunity Show us what you got. You finally got a good class. That is a big improvement. I do think USC's on the rise. If you look year over year, they've been a little bit more consistent this season than they were last season, right? And so I think it's moving in the right direction. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you're watching this live stream later on demand, leave a comment down below what you think. I'm looking to hear some comments and some critiques of my whole setup for how to fix college football. I think it really would fix the entire playoff structure if we had a little bit better conference structure and went back to the divisions that these conferences used to have. So that's kind of the crux of my take. Let me know what you think about Lane Kiffin, about James Franklin getting fired and Penn State without a coach. They talk about recruiting. Oh my goodness. I think they signed the 136th ranked class. There's 136 teams in college football at Division I FBS. So yeah, that was not a good day for them. Hard to recruit when you don't have a coach to sign players. But yeah, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks for the commenters, the chatters. I'm enjoying doing these live streams, so I'm going to probably keep doing them a little bit more often, and we'll see you next time.